Chosen one, what if the very voice that whispers "I love you" at dawn becomes the dagger that pierces your heart at dusk? What if the person who knows your deepest fears becomes heaven's chosen instrument to expose what still needs healing in your soul? What if your closest companion, your spouse of 50 years, your dearest child, your most trusted confidant, has been divinely appointed to deliver the test that will either shatter you or shape you into who God always intended you to be? Listen to me carefully, chosen one. The 28th of August is not circled on your calendar by accident. It's not just another Wednesday in your weekly routine. This date carries the weight of eternity, marked in heaven's ledger as the day when your spiritual maturity will be measured not by your words, but by your silence. Right now, as I speak these words into the atmosphere, there are celestial beings taking notes. Angels are positioning themselves around this moment because they know, they've always known, that you're about to face the most sophisticated attack the enemy has ever launched against your destiny. But here's the shocking truth that will cut you to the bone. The assault won't come from strangers. It will arrive through the familiar voice, the trusted face, the one who shares your morning coffee and knows exactly which buttons to push because they helped install them. The 28th of August. Heaven itself will hold its breath, watching to see if you've finally learned the sacred art of divine restraint. The atmosphere is already shifting, isn't it? You can feel something stirring in your chest, that restless knowing that change is coming. Your spirit recognizes what your mind hasn't yet comprehended. You're standing on the threshold of your greatest test, disguised as your most ordinary day. Before we journey deeper into this mystery together, I want to pause and thank every single one of you who has supported this message through Super Thanks. Your generosity means more than you know. You're not just donating. You're helping spread light to others who feel alone in their calling. Whether you give or not, I'm deeply grateful for your presence here. Your support, your time, your attention, it all matters. And if this message resonates with your soul, go ahead and plant that seed of faith. But right now, if something deep inside you is already trembling with recognition, if your spirit knows this word is for you, I need you to do something that will activate heaven's alignment over your life. Type "I choose silence" in the comments right now. Don't scroll past this moment. Don't let fear convince you to stay hidden. Let heaven and earth witness your commitment to pass the test that so many others have failed. Because the 28th of August is coming, whether you're ready or not. The question is, will you recognize the divine setup when it arrives through the voice you love most? Why does betrayal from a stranger bounce off your heart like rain off a windshield, but one cutting word from someone you love can shatter you for months? Why is it that the deepest wounds, the ones that leave you gasping for breath at 3 a.m., never come from your enemies, but from the hands you trusted most? What if I told you this isn't emotional weakness, but spiritual design orchestrated by heaven itself? Dear chosen one, right now in the throne room of eternity, there's a file with your name written in gold. Angels are turning pages that chronicle every prayer you've whispered in desperation, every tear you've cried in secret, every moment you chose faith when fear was screaming louder. And the divine council is asking one crucial question: are they ready for the next level? Can they handle what we're about to entrust them with? The answer to that question will be determined by what happens on the 28th of August. You see, the enemy gave up trying to destroy you through obvious attacks years ago. He learned something far more sinister. Satan doesn't need strangers to derail your destiny. He uses the familiar voices, the trusted faces, the ones who know exactly which buttons to push because they helped install them over decades of intimacy. Look at Job, a man so righteous that God himself bragged about him to Satan. This wasn't some spiritual weakling who crumbled under pressure. Job had weathered the loss of his wealth, his children, his health, but what nearly destroyed his faith? It wasn't the physical pain or the financial ruin. It was his wife, the woman who had walked beside him through every blessing, looking him in the eye and saying, "Curse God and die." Job 2-9. The closest vessel became the sharpest sword. How many of you know exactly what that feels like? Your spouse of 40 years suddenly questions every spiritual decision you make. Your adult child, the one you raised in Sunday school, now rolls their eyes when you mention God's leading in your life. Your dearest friend begins to doubt the very faith journey that once bonded you together. These aren't coincidences, beloved. These are assignments from heaven's testing department. The enemy has been studying your patterns for decades. He knows that when your daughter uses that particular tone of dismissal, you'll defend yourself. He knows that when your husband sighs every time you mention tithing on a fixed income, you'll argue your point. He knows that when your closest confidant questions your spiritual discernment, you'll prove them wrong with 20 Bible verses and a lifetime of testimonies. But what if proving them wrong proves you're still wrong about what matters most? Picture this scene in your mind. It's 7:30 on a Tuesday morning. You're sitting at your kitchen table, the same table where you've shared countless meals, countless conversations, countless moments of connection. And suddenly, without warning, the person across from you, the one who knows your heart better than anyone, says something that cuts like a surgeon's blade, straight to your most vulnerable place. Maybe it's criticism disguised as concern. Maybe it's doubt wrapped in love. Maybe it's sarcasm aimed at the very thing you hold most sacred. Your heart starts racing. Your throat tightens. Every instinct screams, defend yourself, explain, make them understand. And that's the moment. That's the test. Not what they said, but what you do next. If this has happened in your life, if someone you love has become the voice of your greatest spiritual trial type, that was me in the comments right now. Don't be ashamed of your story. Your pain is proof you're chosen, because the enemy doesn't waste ammunition on empty vessels. Here's what most believers never understand about spiritual warfare. Hell doesn't mobilize against people who pose no threat. The very fact that you've been under assault through intimate relationships is evidence that you carry something the kingdom of darkness fears. Your depression isn't random. Your family conflicts aren't coincidental. Your financial struggles aren't just bad luck. They're strategic attacks designed to keep you distracted from the authority God is trying to activate in your life. But why does God allow the people closest to us to become instruments of our testing? Because proximity creates precision. Anyone can wound you with harsh words, but only someone who knows your history can cut straight to the places that still need healing. Only someone who's witnessed your private struggles can expose the areas where your faith is still fragile. Only someone you trust completely can reveal whether you've truly learned to trust God more than human approval. The spiritual atmosphere is already shifting around the 28th of August. You can feel it, can't you? That restless stirring in your chest, that unexplained heaviness settling over your spirit like morning fog. Heaven is fine-tuning your emotional frequency, adjusting your spiritual thermostat, preparing you for the moment when your closest person becomes God's chosen instrument, not to comfort you, but to complete you. Before this message ends, I'm going to reveal the 3 sacred laws of silence that will either unlock your destiny or seal your defeat on the 28th of August. Miss them, and you'll repeat this spiritual grade for another year. Embrace them, and you'll step through a doorway that most believers never even know exists. But first, you need to understand why your reaction in that moment, that split second between trigger and response, will determine whether you ascend to the next level or remain trapped in the same patterns that have held you captive for decades. You wake up on a Tuesday morning feeling spiritually sensitive, your heart already heavy with something you can't name. You shuffle to the kitchen, the same kitchen where you've shared 30 years of morning coffee, 30 years of quiet conversations, 30 years of building a life together. The sunlight streams through familiar curtains, but something in the atmosphere feels different, charged, dangerous. You pour your coffee, settle into your chair, and mention how God spoke to you in your morning prayer. And then it happens. That sigh. You know the one I'm talking about, don't you? That particular exhale of exasperation that says, "There you go again with your religious nonsense." Or maybe it's your adult daughter calling to check on you, But when you mention tithing from your social security, check the same faithfulness that sustained your family through decades of struggle. She snaps, "Mom, you can't afford to give money to the church when you can barely afford your medications." Perhaps it's your husband of 45 years, rolling his eyes when you suggest praying about his doctor's appointment, muttering under his breath, "God helps those who help themselves, honey." Maybe it's time you helped yourself to some common sense. Feel that? That familiar burn spreading across your chest like wildfire. Your heart starts hammering against your ribs at 120 beats per minute. Your throat constricts until breathing becomes conscious work. Your hands begin to tremble, not from age, but from the rage and hurt colliding in your bloodstream like a spiritual car crash. Every nerve in your body screams for justice. Every wounded place in your soul demands vindication. Your mouth opens, words forming like weapons on your tongue, ready to launch decades of accumulated frustration at the person who just dismissed your deepest convictions as foolishness. But what if I told you that's not just pain you're feeling? That's prophecy. Listen to me, beloved. You think you're experiencing an emotional reaction, but you're actually standing in a prophetic moment disguised as a family argument. That burning in your chest isn't just hurt feelings, it's the fire of God revealing what still needs purification in your spirit. That trembling in your hands isn't weakness, it's the Holy Spirit shaking loose everything that doesn't align with your true calling. The enemy knows exactly what he's doing. He's studied your triggers for 70, 80, maybe 90 years. He's mapped every tender spot, catalogued every wound that never quite healed, documented every insecurity you've carried since childhood. And now he's conducting an orchestra of confusion, using the voice you trust most as his primary instrument. Picture this. You're standing in a field of dry August grass under a scorching sun. The temperature has climbed to 95 degrees. The humidity is suffocating. There's not a cloud in the sky for 20 miles in any direction. Now imagine someone drops a single lit match. What happens? One tiny flame becomes a wildfire that consumes everything for acres around, leaving nothing but ash and devastation in its wake. That matches their words. The dry grass is your emotional state. And the wildfire? That's what erupts when you respond with your flesh instead of your spirit. But here's what will revolutionize everything you thought you knew about spiritual warfare. You have a choice in that split second between trigger and explosion. You can either feed the fire with your reaction, or you can smother it with your silence. One response creates destruction. The other shields your destiny. James 1:19 cuts through this deception like a sword. Be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath. Notice the divine order. Hear first, speak last. Your ears should be faster than your mouth. Your listening should outpace your defending. Your silence should overpower your need to be understood. The Apostle Peter knew this battle intimately. When the soldiers came to arrest Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, what did Peter do? He drew his sword and cut off the servant's ear. His instinct screamed, "Fight, defend, protect." But Jesus rebuked him. "Put your sword back in its place, for all who draw the sword will die by the sword." Matthew 26-52. Your tongue is your sword, chosen one. And every time you draw it in anger, every time you slash back at someone who wounded you first, you're dying a little death in the spiritual realm. You're bleeding out spiritual authority. You're hemorrhaging the very anointing God is trying to increase in your life. But here's the devastating truth that will shake you to your foundation. The enemy doesn't need to destroy you anymore. He gave up that strategy years ago when he realized you've grown too strong, too wise, too seasoned in faith to be taken out by obvious attacks. Now he just needs to distract you. Think about that. He doesn't need you to curse God like Job's wife suggested. He doesn't need you to abandon your faith or stop going to church. He just needs to get you so focused on defending yourself, explaining yourself, proving yourself to people who will never understand your calling, that you completely miss the divine assignment God is trying to download into your spirit. Right now, I need you to do something that will shift the atmosphere over your life. In the comments, write these 5 words: "My silence is my shield." Don't just type it, declare it. Proclaim it before heaven and earth. Let the invisible realm know that you're no longer available for emotional ambushes disguised as family conversations. Because the person who learns to control their tongue in moments of provocation doesn't just win arguments, they win wars that most people don't even know are being fought. But can you handle the weight of that kind of spiritual authority? Let me show you something that will shatter every lie you've believed about betrayal and promotion. The greatest spiritual victories in human history didn't come through comfortable circumstances. They came through crushing betrayal by the people who should have protected the most. Look at Joseph, 17 years old, burning with dreams from heaven itself. But who threw him into that pit? Who sold him for 20 pieces of silver? Was it his enemies? Was it strangers who hated his calling? No, beloved, it was his own brothers. The ones who shared his father's blood, ate at the same table, knew every dream that danced in his young heart. Genesis 37-28 records the most devastating family betrayal in Scripture. So when the Midianite merchants came by, his brothers pulled Joseph up out of the cistern and sold him for 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites, who took him to Egypt. 20 pieces of silver. That's what his own flesh and blood decided his destiny was worth. But here's what Joseph didn't know, as those ropes cut into his wrists, as his tears mixed with the desert dust, that pit wasn't his punishment, it was his promotion. That betrayal wasn't his destruction, it was his divine redirection. Years later, standing as second in command over all Egypt, Joseph would declare the most profound truth ever spoken. "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." Genesis 50-20. The hand that hurts you may be the hand God uses to promote you. But if you think Joseph's story is isolated, let me take you to the Garden of Gethsemane. Picture Jesus, perfect love, wrapped in human flesh, knowing his hour had come. And who betrayed the Son of the living God? Who led the soldiers to his sacred hiding place? Was it the Pharisees he challenged? The Romans who would crucify him? It was Judas, the one who walked with him for 3 years, witnessed water turn to wine, saw the dead rise, shared meals at the same table. Matthew 26-49 pierces like a sword. Going at once to Jesus, Judas said, "Greetings, Rabbi," and kissed him. A kiss. The universal symbol of love twisted into the weapon of betrayal. But listen carefully, that kiss in the garden wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of salvation for every soul who would ever call upon his name. Without Judas's betrayal, there would be no cross. Without the cross, no resurrection. Without the resurrection, no hope for any of us sitting here today feeling the sting of familiar wounds. Now let me paint you a picture that will cut straight to your heart. Hannah, barren and broken, her womb closed by God's own hand. But her greatest torment didn't come from her empty arms, it came from Peninnah, her husband's other wife, who provoked her year after year because the Lord had closed her womb. 1 Samuel 1-6-7. Can you imagine? The woman who shared her home, her husband, her daily existence, became the voice of her deepest shame. Where are your children, Hannah? Why has God forgotten you? What's wrong with you? Sound familiar? The cruelest words don't come from strangers on the street, they come from across the breakfast table. But here's what Hannah did that changed the course of Israel's history. She wept and would not eat. But when confronted, she said, "I am a woman of sorrowful spirit. I have drunk neither wine nor strong drink, but have poured out my soul before the Lord." 1 Samuel 1:15. She chose silence with people and conversation with God. And that choice didn't just birth Samuel, it birthed the prophet who would anoint King David. Her private pain became public blessing for generations. Dear chosen one, you've been living Hannah's story for decades, haven't you? Sitting at dinner tables where your faith gets mocked. Standing in hospital rooms where family members question why you still believe in miracles. sitting at funerals where relatives whisper that your decades of prayer didn't prevent the loss. But what if I told you that every moment you bit your tongue instead of biting back, every time you walked away from arguments you could have won, every tear you cried in silence rather than screaming, your defense, what if all of that restraint has been building a fortress of protection around your children and grandchildren? Your silence across decades hasn't been weakness. It's been warfare. Every harsh word you swallowed became a blessing that rippled through your bloodline. Every time you chose grace over getting even, you shifted the spiritual atmosphere not just for yourself, but for everyone connected to your life. If this is resonating in your spirit right now, if you can feel the truth of these words stirring something ancient within you, hit the like button. Don't just watch passively. That simple act declares to heaven and earth, I am passing this test. You see, beloved, there's a pattern woven through Scripture that most believers miss. The greater the destiny, the deeper the betrayal. The more powerful the calling, the more intimate the wound. God doesn't use comfortable people to accomplish impossible things. He uses broken people who've learned that their greatest weapon isn't their words, it's their willingness to lay them down. Think about your own story for a moment. How many times has your greatest growth come not through celebration, but through devastation? How many of your most profound spiritual breakthroughs happened not when people affirmed you, but when they abandoned you? How many times has God used the very thing that felt like your ending to write your new beginning? This is why the 28th of August carries such prophetic weight. The person closest to you, the one who knows your tender spots because they helped create them, has been chosen by heaven to deliver your final examination. Not because God is cruel, but because He's strategic. Your reaction in that moment will prove whether you've truly learned that some battles are won by not fighting them. The question burning in the spiritual realm right now is this: when the 28th of August arrives and the test comes disguised as conversation, will you remember that the hand that hurts you may be the hand God uses to promote you to your next level? Now listen to me with every fiber of your being, chosen one. What I'm about to reveal has been hidden since the foundation of the world. These are not human strategies or psychological techniques. These are divine laws written in the very fabric of heaven itself, activated only when God's chosen ones understand the sacred power of restraint. The first law: silence is not weakness, it is warfare. Picture this with me. Imagine you're holding a shield made of pure, transparent glass. When arrows of accusation fly toward your heart, when spears of criticism are hurled at your soul, that glass shield doesn't absorb the impact. It doesn't crack under pressure. Instead, every weapon shatters upon contact. Every attack destroys itself against your peaceful strength. That's what divine silence does on the 28th of August. When your closest person speaks words designed to wound, your silence becomes a spiritual force field that turns their weapons back on the very darkness that sent them. You're not being passive, beloved. You're being prophetic. You're declaring to the invisible realm that you refuse to be pulled into the enemy's arena where flesh fights flesh and nobody wins. Jesus understood this when he stood before Pilate. Matthew 27:14 tells us, "But Jesus gave him no answer, not even to a single charge, to the great amazement of the governor." The Son of God, who could have called down legions of angels, chose silence. Not because he was defeated, but because his silence carried more authority than any defense ever could. Your silence on the 28th of August isn't retreat. It's your declaration of war against every demonic force that's been using your loved ones' mouths to delay your destiny. The second law: silence is not emptiness, it is evidence of spiritual maturity. How many decades have you wasted explaining yourself to people who were never equipped to understand your assignment? How many sleepless nights have you spent replaying conversations, wishing you'd said something different, something that would finally make them see who you really are? God is saying to you today, stop auditioning for a role you already have. Stop defending a calling I already confirmed. Stop proving a truth I already established. When you choose silence in the face of misunderstanding, You're not giving up. You're graduating. You're proving to heaven that you've finally learned the difference between being heard by everyone and being understood by the one who matters most. Think about Hannah in 1 Samuel 1:13. Hannah was praying in her heart, and her lips were moving, but her voice was not heard. Silent prayer, wordless worship. And what did that silence birth? Samuel the prophet, who would anoint kings and change nations. Your silence, dear saint, has been birthing something in the spiritual realm that natural eyes cannot see. Every time you've bitten your tongue instead of biting back, every moment you've swallowed your pride instead of serving it on a platter of righteous indignation, you've been making deposits in heaven's bank that are about to pay dividends beyond your wildest dreams. The third law: silence is not surrender, it is the seed of generational blessing. But here's where it gets personal, where this truth cuts straight to your grandparents' heart. Your silence on the 28th of August isn't just about you, it's about your bloodline. It's about children you'll never meet who will walk in freedom because you chose restraint over retaliation. Every harsh word you swallow instead of spitting out becomes a blessing that ripples through your family tree. Every reaction you bury instead of unleashing becomes protection over your grandchildren's future. Every moment you choose peace over proving your point, you're writing spiritual checks that your descendants will cash for generations. Proverbs 13:22 declares, "A good person leaves an inheritance for their children's children." But most people think that's just about money. No, beloved. The greatest inheritance you can leave is a bloodline free from the curse of uncontrolled tongues, a family tree watered by wisdom instead of poisoned by pride. Your daughter who speaks disrespectfully to you now, your silence will teach her honor in ways your words never could. Your son who questions your faith, your peaceful response will plant seeds of conviction that only heaven can water. Your grandchildren watching from the sidelines, they're learning what spiritual strength really looks like. This is why Isaiah 55:11 promises, "My word that goes out from my mouth will not return to me empty, but will accomplish what I desire." Sometimes God's most powerful words are spoken through his people's silence. Type it right now in the comments. My silence is my seed. Don't just think it, declare it. Let heaven witness your commitment to plant what will bloom for decades after you've gone home to glory. Your silence on the 28th of August isn't just spiritual discipline. It's your spiritual will, your inheritance for generations yet unborn. When you resist the urge to defend yourself in that moment of testing, you're not just passing a personal exam, you're breaking generational cycles of conflict that have poisoned your family for decades. But here's the urgent truth that should make your spirit tremble. This window of opportunity won't stay open forever. The 28th of August is coming, whether you're prepared or not. And what happens in that moment of testing will echo through eternity, either as your greatest victory or your most devastating defeat. The question that will determine everything is this: when your moment arrives, will you remember that your silence isn't just self-control, it's the most powerful sermon you'll ever preach? Listen to me, beloved. The world looks at your silver hair and sees decline. Society glances at your slower pace and whispers, irrelevant. Your own children rush through phone calls like your voice is borrowed time. But what if I told you that everything they've whispered about your twilight years is a lie straight from the pit of hell? You are not fading into the background of history. You are stepping into the foreground of eternity. Right now, as I speak these words, there are heavenly courts in session where your name carries more weight than any CEO's signature, more authority than any politician's decree, more power than any celebrity's influence. Why? Because you've been refined by fire, you've been tested by time, you've been proven faithful when faithfulness cost you everything. The world may dismiss you as yesterday's news, but heaven sees you as the guardians of tomorrow's legacy. You're not retiring from purpose, you're graduating into prophetic authority that can only be earned through decades of walking with the Almighty, through every valley, every mountain, every storm that tried to steal your song. Look at Moses. Deuteronomy 34:7 tells us he was 120 years old when he died, yet his eyes were not weak nor his strength gone. But here's what will shake you to your core. Moses didn't just maintain his physical strength in old age. His greatest spiritual victories came in his final years. At 120, he was still receiving direct revelations from God. At 120, he was still speaking with authority that made nations tremble. At 120, he was proving that God doesn't retire his generals. He promotes them to positions where their wisdom becomes weapons of mass salvation. Your age isn't your limitation, it's your qualification. Every wrinkle on your face is a line of wisdom carved by the Master's hand. Every grey hair is a crown of glory, earned through battles that would have destroyed weaker souls. Every slow step you take carries the weight of authority that young legs could never bear. Think about Anna the prophetess. Luke 2:36 tells us she was 84 years old, spending day and night in the temple. The world probably saw a forgotten old woman, invisible in her advanced years. But when baby Jesus was brought to the temple, it was Anna, not the young, not the influential, not the physically strong. It was Anna who first proclaimed redemption to all who looked for it in Jerusalem. Her aged voice became the trumpet that announced salvation to the world. Abraham was 100 years old when Isaac was born. 100. But that child didn't just make Abraham a father, he made him the father of nations. God's promise wasn't fulfilled in Abraham's youth when his body was strong. It was fulfilled in his old age when his faith was steel. You think your ministry days are over? Your impact years are behind you. Your voice no longer matters. The enemy has been feeding you lies to keep you silent during the very season when your words carry the most power, when your prayers shake the foundations of hell itself, when your silence can alter the spiritual DNA of your entire bloodline. This brings us to the 28th of August, and why your silence that day becomes the greatest sermon you will ever preach. Not from a pulpit, not with eloquent words, not with perfect theology, but with restraint so holy, so spiritually charged, that it rewrites the destiny of everyone connected to your life. Your adult children think they know everything, but they need to see what real strength looks like. Your grandchildren are growing up in a world that worships noise, but they need to witness the power of sacred stillness. Your spouse may have grown impatient with your spiritual journey, but they need to experience the authority that flows from someone who has learned when not to speak. Right now, I want you to do something that will shift the spiritual atmosphere over your entire family tree. Whisper the names of your children and grandchildren as I speak. Don't just think them, speak them softly into the air. Let heaven hear you, covering them with your commitment to silence on the 28th of August. Zara, Michael, Jessica. Little Emma, who's only 3, but already carries your stubborn streak. David, who stopped calling after the divorce. Rebecca, who thinks you worry too much. Speak their names into this sacred moment, because here's the truth that will revolutionize how you see your role as a senior saint. Your silence on the 28th of August becomes their covering. Your restraint becomes their redemption. Your refusal to react when provoked becomes a spiritual fortress around their futures. Every word you swallow in love becomes a blessing they'll inherit. Every moment you choose peace over pride plants seeds of wisdom in soil they haven't even discovered yet. You're not just passing a personal test, you're breaking generational patterns. You're not just controlling your temper, you're controlling the trajectory of your bloodline. You're not just staying quiet, you're speaking volumes into the spiritual realm about what real maturity looks like. The silence you maintain on the 28th of August will echo through decades. Your great-grandchildren you'll never meet will benefit from the restraint you show. Your family name will be associated with peace instead of conflict because you chose to be the generation that said, "No more." This cycle of reactive words ends with me, but the most shocking revelation is still coming. Because what happens after the 28th of August, what your silence unlocks, what doors it opens, what destiny it activates, will prove that your golden years were never meant to be your final years. They were meant to be your finest years. Listen to me, chosen one. Right now, somewhere in the heavenly realm, there's a door with your name engraved in letters of fire. Behind that door are the answers you've been praying for, the relationships you've been believing for, the breakthrough you've been crying for in the middle of sleepless nights when the weight of waiting felt unbearable. But here's what will shake you to your very foundation. That door has a lock, not made of gold or silver or any earthly metal. The key to your destiny is forged from something the world throws away: your silence. Sacred, intentional, spiritually charged silence. Keys don't make noise when they open locks, beloved. The loudest prayers in heaven are the ones whispered in restraint when your flesh is screaming to speak. The most powerful declarations are the ones you choose not to make when provocation is staring you in the face. You want to know why your breakthrough has felt so close but never quite arrived? Because you've been trying to shout your way into your destiny when God has been waiting for you to whisper your way through the doorway. On the 28th of August, when that person closest to you says something that cuts to your core, when they trigger the wound you thought had healed, when they question your character, your calling, your very worth, you'll feel the old nature rising. Your hands will want to type the response. Your mouth will want to form the words. Your heart will want to defend what feels under attack. But in that split second, that holy nanosecond, between the trigger and your response, heaven will be watching. Angels will be leaning in. The Holy Spirit will be whispering. Choose the key, not the conflict. Choose the doorway, not the drama. Think about Jesus standing before Pilate, the most powerful man in Jerusalem. Matthew 27:14 tells us something that should stop us in our tracks. But Jesus gave him no answer, not even to a single charge, to the great amazement of the governor, the Son of God, who could have called down legions of angels, who could have spoken creation into existence with a single word, chose silence. Not because he was weak, not because he couldn't defend himself, but because his silence carried more authority than any defense ever could. Pilate was amazed. The most powerful ruler in the region was left speechless by Jesus' silence. That's the power you carry when you refuse to engage with chaos, when you choose not to cast your pearls before swine, when you let your peace speak louder than your pain. But here's the revelation that will change everything. Psalm 56:8 declares, "You keep track of all my sorrows. You have collected all my tears in your bottle." Every tear you've shed in secret silence, every moment you bit your tongue instead of lashing out, every time you walked away from arguments you could have won, God has been collecting them in heaven's bottles. And now those bottles are about to be poured out as blessings so abundant they'll leave you breathless. Your silence hasn't been weakness, it's been spiritual seed planted in the soil of eternity, and the 28th of August is harvest time. The warrior who wins the war is not the one who fights every battle, it's the one who chooses which battles are worth silence. Some conversations don't deserve your words. Some provocations don't merit your response. Some tests are passed not by proving your strength, but by demonstrating your restraint. Every word you don't speak in anger becomes a prayer whispered into eternity. Every reaction you swallow becomes spiritual ammunition, stored in heaven's arsenal. Every moment you choose peace over pride, you're not just avoiding conflict, you're investing in a future so magnificent you can barely imagine it. Right now, as these words penetrate your spirit, something is shifting in the invisible realm. The door of destiny is creaking open. The lock is recognizing the frequency of your surrendered heart. Heaven's bottles filled with your silent tears are being positioned for the greatest outpouring of blessing your family line has ever witnessed. But you must act now. You must seal this moment with commitment that echoes through eternity. Stand up wherever you are right now. I don't care if you're alone in your living room, sitting in your car, or even lying in your hospital bed. Stand in your spirit if your body can't stand. Look toward heaven and whisper these words, with the authority of someone who's finally learned that less can be more. I receive my key. Don't just think it, Speak it into existence. Let heaven hear your voice, declaring that you're ready for the door that your silence will unlock. Let the spiritual realm know you've graduated from the need to win every argument to the wisdom of winning eternal victories through restraint. The 28th of August is coming, whether you're ready or not. The test will arrive through the voice you love most. But now you know the secret. Your silence isn't surrender, it's your coronation. Your restraint isn't weakness, it's your weapon. Your choice to stay quiet when everything in you wants to scream will unlock a door that words could never open. The key is in your hands, chosen one. The question is, will you use it? Silence is not the end, beloved. It is the beginning of echoes in the spiritual realm. When you choose restraint over retaliation on the 28th of August, when you swallow those words that burned like fire in your throat, when you let their cutting remarks hit the shield of your peace and shatter into nothingness, something magnificent happens in dimensions you cannot see. Your silence doesn't disappear into emptiness. It reverberates like thunder across the corridors of eternity. Right now, as I speak these words, there are golden scribes in heaven's archives recording every moment you've chosen peace over pride. Every time you bit your tongue, instead of biting back, angels carried reports of your restraint directly to the throne of the Almighty. Your silence saves, your silence shields, your silence speaks louder than any defense you could ever mount. Think about Hannah in 1 Samuel, weeping silently in the temple while Eli the priest accused her of being drunk. She could have defended herself, explained her pain, justified her tears. Instead, she simply said, "I am a woman of sorrowful spirit. I have poured out my soul before the Lord." Her silence in that moment didn't just birth Samuel, it birthed the prophet who would anoint King David and change the trajectory of an entire nation. Your silence on the 28th of August carries that same generational weight. But here's what will shake you to your core. Every word you don't speak in anger becomes a prayer whispered into eternity. Every reaction you swallow becomes spiritual ammunition stored in heaven's arsenal. Every moment you choose stillness over storm, you're not just avoiding conflict, you're investing in a future that spans decades, touching lives you'll never meet, healing wounds in your family tree that have festered for generations. Your silence saves children who haven't been born yet. Your silence shields marriages that haven't been formed. Your silence speaks freedom over bondages that have held your bloodline captive for 100 years. The enemy knows this. He understands something about spiritual momentum that most believers never learn. The most dangerous time for a chosen one isn't during the test, it's right after they pass it. Because that's when pride whispers, "Look how spiritual you are. Surely now you've earned the right to speak your mind." Don't you dare fall for that trap. Listen to what Jesus declared in Matthew 6-4. Your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. Secret. Not the loud prayers in church, not the public testimonies. The secret silence, the hidden discipline, the moments when no one was watching except the one who matters most. Every tear you swallowed, instead of letting it become a weapon of guilt. Every harsh truth you buried, instead of using it as ammunition. Every moment you walked away from arguments you could have won, heaven recorded it all like golden inscriptions in the book of life. Your silence creates ripples in the spiritual realm that travel at the speed of light, touching dimensions where your grandchildren's prayers will be answered because of the restraint you showed when their grandparent wounded you with words. Your silence builds bridges across generational gaps that seemed impossible to cross. But here's the mystery that will haunt you until you understand it. Why is the 28th of August different from every other day you've practiced restraint? Why does this particular date carry prophetic weight that could shift your entire timeline? What cosmic forces align on this specific Wednesday that make your silence not just wisdom, but warfare? If you feel this truth settling into your bones like warm honey, if something deep in your spirit is confirming that your silent moments have been heard in the highest courts of heaven, I need you to do something right now that will activate angelic attention over your life. Whisper aloud, right where you are, My silence is heard in heaven. Don't just think it, speak it. Let your voice carry that declaration into the atmosphere, because when you acknowledge the power of your restraint, you multiply its impact exponentially. The aftershock of your silence on the 28th of August won't be felt immediately. Like ripples in a pond, the waves will expand outward, touching shores you cannot see. Your children will make better decisions because you chose wisdom over winning. Your spouse will soften their heart because you chose grace over grief. Your friendships will deepen because you chose understanding over being understood. But the question that will determine whether these ripples become tsunamis of transformation is this: are you finally ready to discover why the 28th of August has been circled in heaven's calendar since before time began? Listen to me, chosen one. What I'm about to reveal will expose the most sophisticated attack the enemy has ever launched against your bloodline. The battle you're fighting on the 28th of August isn't happening in your living room. It's raging in the invisible realm where your legacy hangs in the balance. The enemy stopped trying to destroy you years ago. He learned something far more devastating. He doesn't need to kill you. He only needs to silence your influence. He doesn't need to end your life. He only needs to neutralize your impact on the generations that will follow. Right now, as I speak these words, there are demonic principalities gathered around your dinner table. Fallen angels are positioning themselves behind the eyes of the person you trust most. Spiritual wickedness in high places is orchestrating conversations designed to provoke you into breaking the very anointing God has been building in you for decades. Your kitchen table has become a battlefield. Your bedroom has become an altar where either blessing or cursing will be released over your lineage. That living room, where you've shared countless memories, it's ground zero for a war that will determine whether your children rise or fall, whether your grandchildren walk in freedom or bondage. The enemy is not attacking your house, beloved. He is attacking your legacy. Think about Moses when his own siblings, Aaron and Miriam, spoke against him in Numbers 12:1. Has the Lord spoken only through Moses? Hasn't he also spoken through us? The attack didn't come from Pharaoh's army. It came from his own family dining room. But here's what shook the heavens. Moses didn't defend himself. Verse 3 tells us Moses was very humble, more than all men who were on the face of the earth. His silence became his shield, and God himself rose to defend him. Here's the spiritual law most believers never understand. The closer the person is to your heart, the sharper heaven's scalpel becomes. Your spouse knows exactly which words will cut deepest because they've witnessed your most vulnerable moments. Your adult children understand which criticisms will sting most because they've observed your private struggles for years. Your dearest friend can wound you with surgical precision because they've earned access to your tender places through decades of trust. But this isn't cruelty, this is calibration. God is using their intimate knowledge of your weak spots to expose what still needs strengthening in your spiritual armor. It's not them, it's through them. It's not punishment, it's promotion. It's not destruction, it's divine redirection. Picture this invisible war. Every harsh word they speak becomes a fiery dart aimed at your peace. But when you choose silence, when you refuse to take the bait, when you let their accusations hit the shield of your restraint and bounce off without penetrating, something supernatural happens. Those same darts meant to wound you begin to ricochet back toward the sender, but not as weapons. They return as seeds of conviction that only heaven can water. Your silence doesn't just protect you, chosen one. It begins to transform them. The enemy cannot fight a mouth that refuses to serve him. Satan's entire strategy depends on getting you to react in the flesh instead of respond in the spirit. The moment you defend your ego instead of protecting your anointing, the moment you choose pride over peace, you've shifted from the spiritual battlefield to the carnal one, and in the carnal realm, everybody loses. James 1:19 cuts through this deception like a sword. Be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath. Notice the divine order. Hear first, speak last. But how often do we reverse this? How often do our emotions hijack our tongues before wisdom can intervene? That familiar burn in your chest when they question your faith decisions, that's not hurt, it's warfare. That tightness in your throat when they dismiss your spiritual insights, that's not rejection, it's recognition by the enemy that you carry something he desperately wants to silence. That urge to prove your point, to set the record straight, to make them understand that's the trap. Every word you speak in defense of yourself becomes ammunition handed to the forces of darkness. Every argument you engage in is territory surrendered in the invisible realm. Every time you feel compelled to justify your relationship with God, you're feeding the very spirit, trying to separate you from your source of strength. The invisible battlefield is your mouth. And on the 28th of August, when that person closest to you becomes the unwitting vessel for hell's final assault on your peace, your tongue will either be a weapon of mass destruction against your own destiny, or it will become a key that unlocks doors you never knew existed. Your silence on the 28th of August isn't passive, it's prophetic. It's not weakness, it's warfare at its highest level. When you refuse to engage with chaos, when you choose not to cast your pearls before swine, when you let your peace speak louder than your pain, you tap into the same divine authority that left earthly powers trembling before Christ's silence. Type this declaration right now. My silence disarms the enemy. Don't just think it, proclaim it. Let the invisible realm know you understand the rules of engagement. Let every demon assigned to your disruption hear your commitment to fight this battle heaven's way. Because what happens in the next few moments of this message will reveal the 3 sacred laws that turn silence from surrender into spiritual supremacy, and missing them could cost you everything you've been praying for your entire life. Listen to me carefully, chosen one, because what I'm about to reveal will shatter everything you thought you knew about that person sitting across your breakfast table tomorrow morning. On the 28th of August, the individual closest to your heart will not merely test you, they will become something far more profound and terrifying. They will transform into a living, breathing mirror of your soul. But this isn't the kind of mirror that reflects your physical appearance. This is the sacred mirror that reveals what lies beneath the surface, every unhealed wound, every pocket of hidden pride, every area where your faith talks a good game but hasn't fully surrendered. The words they speak won't just be their opinions, they'll be heaven's X-ray, exposing the spiritual fractures you've been hiding, even from yourself. Think about this for a moment. Why does criticism from a stranger slide off your back like water, but one sharp comment from your spouse can leave you wounded for weeks? Why can your adult child trigger you with a single eye roll in a way that your harshest enemy never could? Because proximity creates penetration. They don't just know your buttons, they helped install them over decades of shared history. When Moses came down from Mount Sinai, his face was so radiant with God's glory that the Israelites couldn't look at him directly. Exodus 34-30 tells us they were afraid to come near because his face shone from speaking with the Lord. But here's what most people miss about that story. Moses himself didn't know his face was shining. He needed the people's reactions to understand what had happened to him during his encounter with the divine. Your closest person serves the same function. They reflect back to you what you can't see about yourself. Their reactions reveal your spiritual condition more accurately than any sermon or self-assessment ever could. But here's where it gets uncomfortable, beloved. Here's where the truth cuts so deep you might want to turn this message off. The reason their words wound you so severely isn't because they're particularly cruel, it's because they're particularly accurate. They're holding up a mirror to parts of yourself you thought you'd buried, healed, or overcome. When your spouse questions your financial decisions, they're not attacking your stewardship, they're revealing where your trust in God's provision still has cracks. When your adult child dismisses your spiritual insights, they're not rejecting your wisdom, they're exposing where your need for validation still outweighs your confidence in God's approval. When your dearest friend doubts your discernment, they're not challenging your spirituality, they're uncovering where your pride still masquerades as righteous conviction. The real examination on the 28th of August isn't in their voice, it's in your reflection. The test isn't what they say about you, it's what your reaction reveals about the condition of your heart. James 1:23-24 captures this perfectly. Anyone who listens to the word but does not do what it says is like someone who looks at his face in a mirror and, after looking at himself, goes away and immediately forgets what he looks like. But what if the mirror isn't just scripture? What if God uses the people closest to us as living mirrors, showing us exactly where we still need His transforming touch? Picture yourself standing before a supernatural mirror that shows not your physical features, but the landscape of your soul. Every time your closest person speaks words that sting, that mirror is revealing terrain you thought was healed. Every moment they trigger defensiveness in you, you're seeing areas where the enemy still has access. Every second you feel compelled to justify yourself, you're looking at places where your identity is still tied to human approval rather than divine acceptance. This is why Jesus said in Matthew 7:3, "Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye?" He wasn't just talking about judgment. He was revealing that our reactions to others often expose more about us than about them. The person closest to you, on the 28th of August, they are not your enemy. They are your prophecy in disguise. They are heaven's chosen vessel to show you exactly where you are in your spiritual journey. Not where you think you are, or where you wish you were, but where you actually are. Say it aloud right now, wherever you're sitting. I will not fight my mirror, I will learn from it. Don't just think it, speak it into the atmosphere. Let your voice carry the weight of surrender. Let heaven hear your commitment to receive rather than resist the revelation that's coming. Because the question that will determine everything on the 28th of August isn't whether you can silence their voice. It's whether you can hear what their voice is revealing about the areas of your heart that still need the Master's healing touch. Are you ready to look in the mirror and see not just your face, but your faith reflected in their words? Listen to me, chosen one. Your entire life has been a courtroom, and you didn't even know it. Every moment of pain, every season of testing, every time someone you loved became the weapon that wounded you deepest, heaven has been taking notes, recording evidence, building a case for your promotion. Think back with me now. Remember that moment when your own child questioned your faith in front of the grandchildren. You bit your tongue, you stayed silent when accused, and heaven wrote it down. Remember when your spouse dismissed your spiritual insights as foolish superstition. You swallowed the pain. You stayed silent when misunderstood, and heaven wrote it down. Remember when your closest friend abandoned you during your darkest hour, when you needed them most. You chose grace over gossip. You stayed silent when dismissed, and heaven wrote it down. Remember when family members mocked your devotion, called you extreme for tithing on a fixed income. You held your peace. You stayed silent when provoked, and heaven wrote it down. Every tear you shed in private became liquid evidence of your character. Every word you swallowed instead of spitting out became testimony to your transformation. Every moment you chose restraint over retaliation, heaven's court stenographer was recording. Exhibit A, they chose love when hate was easier. Exhibit B, they chose silence when shouting felt justified. You stayed silent when accused, and heaven wrote it down. You stayed silent when misunderstood, and heaven wrote it down. You stayed silent when dismissed, and heaven wrote it down. You stayed silent when provoked, and heaven wrote it down. But here's what will shatter everything you thought you knew about your pain. Those weren't random trials, beloved. They were legal depositions. Heaven was building a case not against you, but for you. Every injustice you endured without retaliating became evidence of your readiness for authority. Every cruel word you absorbed without returning fire became proof of your spiritual maturity. Psalm 56:8 declares, "You keep track of all my sorrows. You have collected all my tears in your bottle. You have recorded each one in your book. Every silent suffering has been catalogued. Every restrained response has been documented. Every time you held your tongue when your heart wanted to scream, an angel made an entry. Evidence of divine character development. Case number: your name. Status: ready for promotion. Do you understand what this means for your life? Do you grasp the cosmic significance of every moment you've been misunderstood, but chose not to defend yourself? Those weren't defeats, dear one. They were victories being recorded in heaven's supreme court. You stayed silent when your integrity was questioned, and heaven wrote it down. You stayed silent when your motives were twisted, and heaven wrote it down. You stayed silent when your sacrifices went unnoticed, and heaven wrote it down. You stayed silent when your love was taken for granted, and heaven wrote it down. Each silence became a signature on a legal document that hell cannot contest. Each restrained response became irrefutable evidence that you've learned to trust God's justice over human validation. Each swallowed word became proof positive that you're ready for the kind of blessing that requires mature character to steward properly. But here's where it gets prophetic. Here's where the 28th of August becomes the culmination of decades of evidence gathering. On that day, when your closest person delivers their final test through words that cut to your core, your silence won't just be another entry in heaven's ledger. It will be the closing argument, the final piece of evidence that proves you've graduated from victim to victor, from reactor to responder, from flesh-driven to spirit-led. Write this in the comments right now. Heaven wrote it down. Don't just type it, declare it. Let the spiritual realm know you finally understand that your pain had purpose, your silence had significance, your restraint had reward attached to it. You stayed silent when betrayed by those you trusted most, and heaven wrote it down. You stayed silent when your generosity was met with greed, and heaven wrote it down. You stayed silent when your wisdom was called foolishness, and heaven wrote it down. You stayed silent when your faithfulness was forgotten, and heaven wrote it down. Here's the revelation that will revolutionize how you see every injustice you've endured. Your silence wasn't passive submission, it was active evidence. Every time you refused to engage in warfare with words, you were submitting Exhibit A, B, C, and D of your transformation. Every moment you chose peace over proving your point, you were building an irrefutable case for your next-level blessing. The courtroom of heaven has been in session your entire life. The defendant, every limitation, every delay, every door that's remained closed to you. The prosecutor, your own patient endurance under fire. The evidence, every silent response when flesh wanted to fight. The verdict? It's about to be announced on the 28th of August. But only if you understand that silence isn't surrender. It's the sound of heaven saying, case closed, promotion approved. Listen to me, dear one. What you do on the 28th of August isn't just about passing a personal test. It's about signing a spiritual contract that will echo through bloodlines you may never meet. Your silence on that day becomes a sacred inheritance, a legacy written in restraint that your great-great-grandchildren will cash in decades from now. Think about this. Right now, somewhere in the future, there's a child who carries your DNA in their veins. They don't know your name yet. They've never heard your voice. But they're going to face a crisis, a moment when everything in their world is falling apart, when hope seems dead, when the enemy whispers that their family is cursed to repeat the same broken patterns forever. And in that moment, beloved, the silence you choose on the 28th of August will rise up like a shield around them. The restraint you show when every fiber of your being wants to lash out will become a fortress of protection they never knew they inherited. Your unspoken words will speak life into their darkest hour. Your silence builds walls around them. Your silence lights lamps before them. Your silence leaves footprints for them. Proverbs 13:22 declares, "A good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children." But what kind of inheritance are we talking about? Not just money that can be spent or property that can be sold. We're talking about spiritual capital, the kind of wealth that multiplies across generations, the kind of treasure that breaks chains instead of building them. Every time you bite your tongue, instead of biting back, you're depositing peace into their future accounts. Every moment you choose grace over getting even, you're building bridges they'll walk across when their own relationships are tested. Every second you hold your silence when your pride screams for vindication, you're planting seeds in soil they haven't even been born to tend yet. Your silence builds walls around them. Your silence lights lamps before them. Your silence leaves footprints for them. But here's what will cut you to the bone. How many generational curses could have been broken if your ancestors had learned this sacred art? How many family feuds could have died in their throats if your grandparents had chosen restraint over retaliation? How many wounds could have healed instead of festered if the generations before you had understood that silence is not surrender, it's spiritual warfare at its highest level? The enemy knows something about bloodlines that most believers never grasp. He knows that patterns pass from parent to child like DNA. He knows that the way you handle conflict today becomes the template your children use tomorrow. He knows that your grandchildren are watching, even from the womb of time, learning how to fight or how to forgive, based on the choice you make when someone you love wounds you deepest. Picture your granddaughter, 25 years from now, facing the same test you're about to face. Her husband says something that cuts straight to her heart. Her children question her faith. Her closest friend betrays her trust. And in that moment of searing pain, something rises up in her spirit, not bitterness, not the need to defend herself, but supernatural restraint. A wisdom she doesn't remember learning. A strength that feels ancient and inherited. That's your silence, working across decades. That's the legacy of restraint you're about to leave on the 28th of August. Your silence builds walls around them. Your silence lights lamps before them. Your silence leaves footprints for them. But this inheritance isn't automatic. It's not something that just happens because you share the same last name. This legacy must be activated through intentional choice, through conscious surrender, through the deliberate decision to let your pain become their protection. Right now, I need you to do something that will shift the spiritual atmosphere over your entire family line. I want you to speak their names out loud if you're alone, in your heart if you're not. Say the names of your children, your grandchildren, that great-grandchild who's just learning to walk. Say the names of descendants you'll never meet, bloodline you'll never hold, futures you'll never see with your natural eyes. Speak their names as a covering for the 28th of August. Declare over them, my silence builds walls around you. My silence lights lamps before you. My silence leaves footprints for you. Because here's the stunning truth that will revolutionize how you see your golden years. You're not retiring from influence, you're graduating into it. You're not becoming less important, you're becoming eternally significant. The world might treat your voice like it's already buried, but heaven treats your silence like it's about to birth nations. Moses was 120 when he died, but Deuteronomy 34:7 tells us his eye was not dim, nor his natural force abated. Why? Because his greatest legacy wasn't the miracles he performed in his youth, it was the wisdom he carried in his final years. The way he held his peace when the people complained. The way he chose restraint over retaliation when even his own siblings spoke against him. Your silence on the 28th of August is like spiritual DNA being encoded into your family's future. Every word you don't speak in anger becomes a prayer whispered into eternity. Every reaction you swallow becomes a blessing that ripples through generations. Every moment you choose peace over pride, you're writing a check of grace that children not yet born will cash when they face their own impossible moments. Your silence is not only your seed, it is your signature on eternity. The question that will determine your family's trajectory for the next 100 years is this. When the 28th of August arrives, will you sign that signature in restraint or regret? Beloved chosen one, as we come to the end of this sacred journey together, I need you to carry these truths with you like precious stones in your heart. Remember this, the 28th of August is not just another date on your calendar, it's your divine appointment with destiny. Your silence on that day isn't weakness, it's warfare. It's not giving up, it's rising up to a frequency where your restraint becomes your greatest strength. Remember that the person closest to you may become the vessel through which your deepest test arrives, but that test isn't meant to break you. It's meant to reveal the spiritual giant you've become through decades of walking with God. Remember that your silence on the 28th of August creates a legacy that will echo through generations. Every time you choose peace over pride, every moment you resist the urge to defend yourself, every second you hold your tongue when your heart wants to scream, you're writing spiritual checks that your children and grandchildren will cash for years to come. But most importantly, remember this. You are never walking this path alone, even when the road feels uncertain, even when the test seems overwhelming, even when doubt whispers lies in your ear. The Creator of the universe is working behind the scenes on your behalf. He's moving mountains you can't see, opening doors you haven't found yet, and orchestrating blessings you can't even imagine. And right here, in this community of believers, you have thousands of brothers and sisters who understand your struggles, who believe in your calling, and who are ready to stand with you in prayer. We're not just viewers on a screen, we're a family united by faith, connected by hope, and bound together by the love of Christ. Let me ask you this final question, and let it settle deep in your spirit. When the 28th of August arrives and that moment of testing comes, will you remember who you really are? Will you choose the legacy of silence that transforms not just your life, but the lives of everyone you touch? Before I release you into your destiny, I want to pray over you right now. Wherever you are, I want you to feel the weight of my hand on your shoulder as I speak these words over your life. Heavenly Father, I lift up every precious soul who has walked with us through this message tonight. Lord, you see their hearts, you know their struggles. You've counted every tear they've cried in the midnight hours when no one else was watching. But Father, you also see their strength. You know their calling. You've already written their victory story. God, I pray that you would silence every voice of doubt that whispers, "You're too old," or "It's too late." I pray that you would break every chain of disappointment that has held them captive. I pray that you would open their eyes to see the doors you're already opening, the opportunities you're already creating, the legacy you're already building through their faithful silence. Father, place your mighty hand upon their shoulders right now. Let them feel your presence like a warm embrace. Give them the courage to face the 28th of August with confidence, knowing that their silence is not surrender, it's spiritual authority. Give them the wisdom to see through the test, to the testimony that's being written. Give them the strength to choose peace when everything around them screams for war. Lord, bless their families, heal their relationships, and let their silence on the 28th of August become a turning point that breaks generational cycles and establishes generational blessings. Use their restraint to teach their children honor, their peace to heal old wounds, and their grace to demonstrate what true spiritual maturity looks like. And Father, remind them daily that they are loved beyond measure, chosen beyond understanding, and never, ever alone. In Jesus' mighty name I pray. Amen. Now, I want to hear from you. In the comments below, share how this message has touched your heart. Tell us what God spoke to you about the 28th of August. Ask us to pray for specific areas of your life where you need strength to choose silence over reaction. Don't hold back, your testimony might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. Type "I choose silence" if you're committing to this spiritual discipline on the 28th of August. Type "Pray for me" if you need this community to surround you with intercession. And if this message has stirred your soul, please share it with someone who needs to understand that their silence has power, their restraint has purpose, and their golden years can become their greatest years. Before you go, if this is your first time here, welcome to the family. Hit that subscribe button and join thousands of believers who gather here regularly to be encouraged, equipped, and empowered for kingdom living. Ring that notification bell so you never miss a message that God might use to transform your life. Thank you for staying with me through this entire journey. Thank you for opening your heart, for letting these words penetrate the sacred chambers of your soul. Thank you for being brave enough to consider that maybe your silence could be your greatest sermon, your restraint, your most powerful testimony. Until we meet again, walk in the authority of who you are. You are chosen, you are loved, and you are about to discover that sometimes the most profound thing you can say is nothing at all. Go in peace, chosen one. The 28th of August is coming, and heaven is cheering you on.